Hey everybody, it's Greg back to here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to get an accurate exposure and accurate colors in your videos every single time. Alright, so we're looking at the X-rite Video Passport. Now you can see here we have a white strip, we have a 18% gray strip here, and we have a darker gray and black. So when you go into post, as long as you have this shot where your subject is, you can use the scopes in your software in post-production to really dial in your exposure, really to dial in your colors, and I'll show you how to do that in the second part of this video. So let's talk about this. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do this. If your camera has a waveform monitor, then this is super simple. All you have to do is set this gray patch on your waveform monitor to 40 IRE. Now if you don't have a waveform on your camera, you can use your zebras, and you should set your zebras to about 95, and then once you see the zebras, you can just dial it down until they disappear, and that'll be roughly at about 90 IRE, your white patch. So that's another way to do it if you don't have a waveform monitor. So what you want to do is place this card where your subject is, so where I am right now, so the light is falling on me. You want to dial in your exposure first, and then you want to do a custom white balance on your camera. Now how you do that differs from camera to camera. I know you can do it on the Panasonic GH5 or the Sony a7 III. You can do a custom white balance in camera. So the first thing you want to do, put this where your subject is, get an accurate exposure for your subject, and then you want to flip this card over. So I'm going to do that now. All right, so we're looking at the other side of the card. So once you have your exposure right, then you want to do a custom white balance in camera. So this would work too if you were outdoors. Let's say you were shooting in 4 different locations outdoors. You were shooting in the shade for one shot, you were in bright sunlight for another, it was sort of mixed lighting in another. You would take a shot of this for every lighting scenario. So you would set your exposure first, like we talked about with the waveform monitor or your zebras. Then you would have this side showing, and then you would do your custom white balance in camera. Now also you would have this reference in post. We're going to go to that in a second, and that'll allow you to dial in your exposure and fine tune things as well as your white balance. So like I said before, you get your exposure, then you do your custom white balance, and then you can go into post and you could really tweak things. So let's go over to the computer in a second. Now I'm going to show you how to do it in Adobe Premiere using scopes, but there's also scopes available in Final Cut as well as DaVinci, and the process is pretty much the same. All right, let's head to the computer. All right, so here we are in Adobe Premiere Pro, and we're on the color tab. So if you look at the top, we're on the color tab. If you don't see these scopes, go over to the left here where it says Lumetri Scopes, click on that, and then come down to the wrench icon here, which is the settings. Click on that, and make sure that you have Vector Scope YUV checked, Parade RGB checked, and Waveform RGB checked. And then you should see what I'm seeing on my screen. Now to make things easier too, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an adjustment layer, because you can see I have these clips broken up, but I want to do just one adjustment to all of those. So I'm going to click on Editing. I'm going to come down here, View or New Item, click Adjustment Layer. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to drop this over my timeline. And right now I have this toggled on and off. Now I can see any adjustments. So I'm going to click on my adjustment layer again. I'm going to come back to my color tab. I'm going to make my adjustments on the adjustment layer. So that way, if you have a bunch of different clips that have the same white balance and exposure, you can make all your adjustments on one layer. Another way to do it is if you just had one track, you could just do it all on that one track. But I've already cut this up and done some editing. All right, so we're on our adjustment layer. Now the first thing that we want to do is we want to open up our basic correction tab. Now you can see here we have our waveform monitor here, our RGB, and our vector scope. Let's talk about white balance first. So we did an in-camera white balance adjustment. So you can see our red, our green, and our blue. They're pretty accurate. They're pretty close. Now if you want to, you can try the white balance selector tool. You just click on that, you click on a white patch. It makes a small tweak. You can see now it says they think it should be minus 1.8 or 1.2. It's up to you if you decide that that looks better than what you had. Now you can also do it in a slower method. I'll show you that in a second. So we've got our white balance set now. Now if you look at our waveform, here's the 18% gray, which is supposed to be at 40% IRE. So if you look there, it's a little bit low. So now we can bring up our exposure if we wanted to bring that up. Or we could bring up our whites and our highlights. So I'm going to do it that way. So I'm going to bring up our whites a little bit. You'll see our whites get a little brighter. I'm going to get that closer to 40 IRE. Let's just say we're at around 50 there. And I'm also going to bring up my highlights a bit, because you can see our scope goes from 0 to 100, so we're not peeking out. I can bring that up a little bit as well there. Now, if I toggle this on and off, you could see those adjustments now are just refining the exposure. So you try to get it as close as you can in camera using a waveform monitor or zebras, and then you make some tweaks here using your scopes. And this is going to give you more accurate color and exposure. Now, also, if you look at our vector scope, you could see that we can go a little higher on our saturation. So as I up the saturation, you could see that the vector scope starts to spread out to the outer limits. Now, if you look at this, you can also see, we're oversaturated obviously, but you can also see here that our yellow, our red, our magenta, our cyan, and our green are not exactly lined up. So I'm going to show you how to do that manually, as well as how to really manually dial in your white balance using your scopes. So let's do that part next. All right, so we want to go to the Effects tab here. So click on Effects at the top, and then where you see Opacity, and you see this little box here, we're going to create a mask. So I'm going to click on that. Now you can see our mask. Now I want to just put this around our 18% gray square. So I'm just going to do that now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check that that white balance is accurate. So this is more of a slower way to do it. If you really want to get pinpoint accurate, this is how you can do this. Now you can do similar things in Final Cut as well as in DaVinci Resolve. So what I want to do is just create that mask right there. Now I'm not seeing that mask where I want to see it. So that's interesting. And it might be because I'm on the adjustment layer. So if I click here and we take that mask, so let's copy that mask from the adjustment layer. We'll click there because we've already created it. So we're going to click on that. We're going to say copy, and then we're going to click on this layer. We're going to go to opacity. We'll click on here and we'll paste that mask. And then you can see we did that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You can't make a mask adjustment on an adjustment layer. So you have to do it on that layer there. So I'm just going to disable that adjustment layer because we don't need that. All right, so now we have this isolated. So if I go back to color, you can see here the dot. That should be in the center. That should be an accurate white balance. If I wanted to take my temperature slider, if you see if I go left, you could see we're veering from center. So you really want to make sure that you've got that centered. So you can do these fine adjustments here as well as for your white balance if you don't trust the eyedropper tool. So that looks pretty good to me. But also we can go a step further. So let's go back to the Effects tab. I'm going to get rid of that mask. So all you have to do is click on that mask right here, and we could say cut. And that's gone. Now what we can also do is really dial in our different colors. So let's take the mask again. We'll click on that. And we're just going to dial in these colors right here. So if you look, we have those colors we mentioned earlier, our yellow, our red, our magenta, our blue, our cyan, and our green are right here on our chart. So what we're going to do is we're just going to isolate these colors. And then we could really dial these in. All right, so we've got our colors right here. So what we want to do now is go back to the Color tab, and we can go to Curves. And if you see there's Hue, Saturation Curves, RGB Curves, we can click on that. We also have our color wheels, but we're going to go to Hue, Saturation Curves, and we have Hue versus Hue. Now what I want to do is go to the eyedropper tool, come over to the yellow, and click on that. And now that I have that highlighted, we want to make sure that we have that highlighted, but you can see right here. Now, if I take this right here and I expand that out, you could see that if I push up, it goes to the right. If I push down, it goes to the left. We want to make sure that's pointing at our yellow square right there. So we want to make sure that's pointing there. Now the yellow is pretty good to start with, but you can see our cyan needs a little help, the green and the red. So let's focus on the red and the green. So we're going to click here on the red, and now you can see we have our dot in the middle here. And if I go like this, you could see it's the band between the center dot and the red dot. So keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that in case we have to refine that. But we're going to take our red dot and we're going to point it a little bit more towards the red box. So right about there. It's a little bit better than it was. And then we can refine that line to make it tighter. So as you see, as we make it tighter, our red line's a little off. We're going to bring that back a little bit, and then we're going to bring our orange dot down. And it's a little bit more labor intensive using this method. Now let's try the green, because to me the green looks a little off as well. I'm going to click on the green, and then you can see we have our green here. We're going to adjust that until we get that more centered towards the green. And that looks pretty good. I think our cyan needs a little work too. We're going to click on that, and we're going to click on our cyan. And you can see there's our cyan there. And we're going to just tweak that a little bit, get it pointed at the cyan. And to me, that looks a little bit more accurate as far as getting our colors. Now let's have a look at how this looks, because it doesn't always work as well as you think it would. So let's get rid of this mask now and have a look at the colors. We're just going to cut that mask. Now you can see it's more accurate technically as far as the different boxes go. But if you look at the color, I'm going to toggle this on and off. And if you look at the color, it's not super accurate in my opinion. So let's just toggle this on and off. So I'll just take this right here, and we'll just toggle this whole section off. That didn't affect it, so we'll just toggle this one here. I guess it's a little more accurate. It was looking a little green before. Now it's looking a little more accurate. Now what we can do too is if we want to just take up the overall saturation, once we have those boxes lined up a little better, we can also just do that here in our basic tab. And we can bring that saturation up a little bit more. And that's really a step-by-step sort of more technical way of doing it. Now you can also use a LUT. So what I'll do is I'll bring in a new adjustment layer, and I'll show you a LUT that I'm using that kind of makes everything a little bit easier. So I'm going to drop a new adjustment layer over top of everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go to this tab here. We're going to go back to color, and I'm just going to reset that. So those adjustments are reset. This previous adjustment layer is disabled. You can see here. So we have a new adjustment layer. So with this, I'm going to use a LUT instead. So if you're someone who likes to just work quickly, as long as you get your white balance and your exposure set properly, which we'll do right now. So let's go back. So let's just pretend we brought this clip in. We'll just use the exposure tab. We'll bring that up to about 40 IRE. There's our exposure. We're going to go to our adjustment layer. We're going to go to input LUT. And I like to use the Leeming LUTs. It's a Leeming LUT Pro. I shot this on the Panasonic GH5 in HLG. I'm going to click on that, and you can see that it does a lot for us, although it brought the exposure down a little bit more. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit more. I'm going to bring up the exposure to where I think it should be. And I think it's a little too contrasty. I think I'll bring that down a little bit. So bringing the contrast down. And then if I toggle this on and off, you could see we got a pretty good looking image right there. A lot faster than the manual method. But I wanted to show you both ways, how to get accurate exposure and color, how to make those adjustments manually, and then how to use a LUT to get there a lot quicker. So anyway, I hope you found this helpful. All right, thanks for watching this video. Give me a thumbs up if you found it helpful. If you have any comments or questions, you can post them down below. And if you're not already a subscriber, just hit that subscribe button and hit that bell notification to get email updates for future videos. All right, thanks again for watching. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.